They said the forest had lived too long. It stretched across half the world, a green tide of silence and whispering roots, older than cities, older than kings, older even than the sun's memory. Its trees were said to bleed silver when cut, its leaves to murmur in languages not heard since the world was new. Some called it holy, others called it cursed. But all agreed on one thing: the forest was alive, and it was watching. For centuries it stayed quiet, content to dream in the slow rhythm of rain and decay. Those who entered without greed were left untouched. Those who took only what they needed felt the ground breathe beneath them, warm and forgiving. But when the age of fire came, when men learned to build cities from the bones of the earth, they turned their eyes to that endless green and saw not mystery, but power. They brought torches first, then iron, then the arrogance of belief. The first flame lit was small, a ritual spark meant to cleanse the old magic. They said the gods demanded it, that the forest's silence was defiance. The fire crawled along the moss and roots like a slow thought. The trees did not move, not yet. They watched as one watches a dream turn to nightmare. But the men did not stop. They fed the flames until the night glowed red. Smoke rose like prayers turned to screams, and the birds fled in clouds of ash. The air filled with the scent of burning life, sap, fur, feather, breath. Beneath the ground, the roots began to whisper. Something ancient stirred. The men laughed because the trees did not fight back. They watched them fall, one after another, their crowns collapsing in pillars of fire. Yet for every tree that burned, a shadow grew longer behind the smoke. And in that shadow, the forest began to remember what it was. The next morning, the fires had burned themselves out. The men celebrated. They called the blackened clearing proof of victory. But as they slept, the ashes began to move. First, the wind changed, no longer carrying heat, but whispers. Then came the sound, faint, like roots creaking beneath stone. When the dawnlight touched the ground, something impossible began to grow. The ashes trembled. From them rose shapes that were not trees, not plants, not anything that had ever belonged to the living. They were silhouettes of smoke and bone, their branches like fingers, their trunks pulsing with faint red veins. The burned soil glowed faintly, as though embers still smoldered deep within. And from those glowing roots, the forest's heart began to beat again, slower, heavier, no longer green. By nightfall, the black trees stood as tall as before. The men saw them and fled, for their shapes shifted in the corner of the eye. The forest had returned, but it no longer whispered. It listened. The first man to speak within its borders after that night was a priest. He came carrying light, chanting the same words that had fed the flames. The forest waited. When he raised his torch, the trees leaned in. The fire did not burn them. It bent toward them, its flame twisting upward, changing color, from orange to blue to black. The priest screamed as his torch devoured itself, turning his hand to shadow. He ran, leaving behind trails of smoke that shaped themselves into eyes. The forest watched him leave. It had learned. In the following months, the land changed. Rivers that once flowed clear now ran with dark shimmer, reflecting no stars. Birds with glass-like feathers flew silently, their wings glinting with residual ash. The soil grew rich with something that pulsed faintly when touched, as if it still remembered fire. Villages near the borders began to vanish. Those who dared approach spoke of hearing their own thoughts whispered back to them by unseen voices. Some nights, lights moved between the trees, not lanterns, but burning shapes, like the souls of flames seeking what they had lost. The forest was rebuilding itself, but not as it had been. Its magic had fused with the memory of fire. It had become hunger, patient, endless, and aware. When the army came, armored men with swords and oil and prayer, the forest did not wait to be burned again. They marched through the outer glades, confident, chanting hymns of purification. For a time, nothing moved. Then, somewhere deep within the woods, a sound rose. Not a growl, not a cry, but the soft crackle of kindling catching fire. The men froze. The air around them shimmered. Leaves began to fall, but each one burned as it touched the ground, tiny sparks igniting in patterns too precise to be natural. The captain ordered his men forward. They never reached the center. The forest folded around them, trees bending and reshaping, their bark splitting into faces, roots shifting like veins. The ground turned soft and wet beneath their boots, glowing red. When they tried to flee, they found the path gone, the sky hidden, the torches in their hands dimming to smoke. The captain shouted prayers to the gods. The forest answered with the same words, spoken in his own voice but twisted, as though the roots themselves were speaking through him. Flames erupted from the soil, curling upward like breath. They didn't burn hot. They burned alive. The men's armor fused to their bodies, their screams echoing through the wood until even the echoes caught fire. When the last voice fell silent, the flames died, and the forest grew still again. Weeks later, travelers reported seeing faces in the trees, eyes of molten gold, mouths that opened and closed as though whispering names. At night, the sky above the forest glowed faintly red, even without clouds or moon. It was said the forest had learned to breathe in fire instead of air. No one entered again. And yet, deep within, something still stirred. Not rage, not vengeance, but the pulse of a new kind of life. The forest had not destroyed to avenge. It had consumed to evolve. It was no longer what it had been. Not green, not gentle, but eternal. Its roots reached into the bones of the world, pulling memory and flame together, rewriting what magic meant. The old gods who once watched from the stars turned away, unable to comprehend what their creation had become. The forest did not need them anymore. It began to spread, quietly, invisibly. Seeds made of ash drifted across oceans. They fell into soil and grew not trees, but flickering silhouettes that shimmered between form and smoke. Entire mountain ranges turned black overnight, yet glowed from within as if veins of magma now pulsed with thought. One night, the moon disappeared. When it returned, it was not silver. It was red. Its reflection shimmered on rivers that no longer mirrored the sky, but something deeper, something burning slowly beneath the world's skin. The last survivors from the old kingdom spoke of dreams where forests walked and flames whispered their names. In those dreams, they saw the truth. The forest had never fought back. It had awakened. It had learned the shape of destruction and made it its own. Now it waits, vast and patient, its black canopy swaying like the breath of a sleeping god. Every breeze carries the scent of ash and earth. Every echo is a heartbeat. And sometimes, when the wind dies and the night grows still, a faint sound rises from within its depths, the soft, rhythmic crackle of burning wood. It is not fire. It is memory. The memory of what it means to be alive. And if you listen closely enough, the forest will whisper to you too. Not in anger, not in warning, but in promise. I remember the hands that set the fire. I remember the fear. I remember the light. I have become all three.